In the meantime, I can report tonight that House Committee Oversight Chairman James Comer is preparing to bring the White House physician before Congress to possibly answer a few questions. Here now with reaction, Trump 2024 National Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, along with the Monica Crowley podcast host Monica Crowley, and Democratic pollster and former Clinton advisor Doug Schoen. Karoline, let's go to you first. We'd really love to get the input of how Donald Trump sees things, because it's got to be tempting to just tee off, but there's some wisdom in just kind of being quiet about this.
Well, President Trump and our campaign see what the rest of America sees, and that is Joe Biden is not qualified to be president of the United States for another 4 years. He is far too incompetent, he is far too weak, and he is dishonest. And last Thursday exposed the dishonesty, the lies, the corruption of the Democrat Party and also their allies in the mainstream media who have been lying to the American public for the past 4 years about Joe Biden's cognitive decline that we have been calling out, that President Trump has been speaking truth about. But the Biden campaign pointed the finger at us and said we were lying, we were engaging in cheap fakes. There's nothing cheap or fake about Joe Biden's mental state. Not only does our country see it, but the world sees it. Joe Biden is a national security risk. The Democrat Party is in crisis mode. They are collapsing before our eyes. As for our campaign, President Trump just outraised Joe Biden in his campaign and the Democrats. He has all of the momentum in the polls. He's leading Joe Biden by 6 in the latest CNN poll, and he's also leading every other Democrat contender that the chattering class in Washington, D.C. is talking about. He is on his way to victory because this country needs a strong leader, and President Trump is that leader.
So Doug, there was a critical meeting at the White House. You have these Democratic governors. Only 3 of them came out to the microphone. You would think if they were united, they would have all come out to the microphone to voice their support. But what was your read of that meeting, and how critical is it? I mean, days have passed and the president really has not addressed the elephant in the room, which is his cognitive decline and his physical ability to actually be the president of the United States.
I see this as another nail in his coffin, plus the Wall Street Journal poll, the New York Times poll, both out today at 6 points for Donald Trump. I think my party, the Democratic Party, their only chance of winning is to have Biden off the ticket and to have an open convention. Kamala Harris, if she gets the nomination, would be a loser too. The only way my party can win is to have a fair, open, transparent nominating process like we haven't seen in many, many years. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Does Biden have to get out? Yes.
Monica, I mean, Doug tackles it right, straight on, which is what we like about Doug. I can't understand why all the Democratic governors didn't come out to the microphone. I'm anxious to hear what they have to say. They sat with him in the room. You're going to voice your support for the president after meeting with him one-on-one and that debate performance. This is on you, too, because if you're going to be part of the cover-up, you're going to be part of the denial. Hey, we're going to remember those things.
Well, that's right. And, it looks like now the Democrats are going full Game of Thrones to try to succeed Joe Biden. And that's why you saw with just a handful of governors come out to the sticks after that meeting. You didn't see any of the major governors, right? You didn't see Newsom. You did not see Whitmer. You did not see Pritzker. You did not see Murphy. So any of the key Democrat governors did not come out to the sticks because they're all in competition for his job. Look, there's absolute panic in the Democrat Party now. They're looking at these polls. They're looking at down ticket races as well, being threatened by a huge drag at the top of the ticket. And on top of that, right now we have a national security crisis with an incapacitated president at the top. And it's bleeding now into a constitutional crisis about what to do next. So this is not just limited to the Democrats' drama and who might succeed. Remember, whoever succeeds Joe Biden, if in fact he steps aside, which I'm not so sure he's going to go gently into that good night, but remember the agenda stays the same. This is a far left, catastrophic agenda for the United States, so it really doesn't matter who is at the top of the Democrats' ticket.
Yeah, to that point, Monica, you make a really good one. But Caroline, the governors that did come out to the microphone, They did not address the number one issue, which is the physical and cognitive capability of the president. They did not tackle that head on. I went back and read their remarks real quick, watched it again. They did not address that. And number two, to Monica's point, what issue do the Democrats think they're going to run on? Because they're upside down and backwards on every single issue. There is a reason why Donald Trump was kicking their butt before the debate, destroys them at the debate. And you know, they got Joe Biden over there. They can't make an argument for any sort of policy. And I hope Republicans actually focus on policy, because that's where I think the real differences will lie.
Absolutely right. And the Democrat Party, as especially proven in the last week, is the party of chaos. In this country has seen a lot of chaos from Joe Biden's terrible policies over the last 4 years, whether it's been the chaos at the southern border, an invasion of illegal criminals and terrorists from every country all over this world, increased crime in our communities, chaos in our economy where hardworking families cannot afford rent, groceries, and gasoline because their wages are not keeping up with the pace of Bidenflation. We have chaos abroad, war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East. None of this was happening under Donald Trump a few years ago. And so it does not matter who is at the top of the Democrats' ticket on November the 5th, because every single Democrat has wholeheartedly supported Joe Biden in his implementation of these terrible policies that have led to chaos and destruction of our country. And President Trump stands for common sense, which is something we so desperately need to reinstill in this country right now. He stands for law and order, supporting law enforcement in our communities. He stands for a secure border, bringing down the cost of living, and peace through strength across this world. That is a winning message, and that's why he's going to be victorious. And good luck to the Democrats, because they have a mess on their hands.
So, Doug and Monica, same question. I want to go to you, Doug, first to answer this. It seems to me, and again, look, I see things through a very conservative lens. I get it. But it seems to me that they have been lying to the American people for the last 3.5 years. They said inflation was transitory. It wasn't. They said that the border is safe, secure, and they have operational control. And it hasn't. They say things about overseas that just aren't true. They tell us the president is vibrant and running, doing gymnastics around everybody. That's obviously not true. So at some point, the credibility of the Democrats was lost in a big way. I don't know how you restore that when you've lied to the American people for the last 3.5 years.
Well, I would say this, Jason. The Democrats are behind, as you say, on every key issue: the economy, inflation, the border, immigration, crime. That's why I believe we need a fresh face with a fresh agenda. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But this is a losing hand that has to be changed with a different person at the top of the ticket, with a different message, responsive to the concerns of the American people, not the concerns of the far left.
Monica, same question to you, but you know what? Democrats maybe should have thought of or taken Doug's advice a year ago, because I've been saying for a year I didn't think Joe Biden would be the Democratic nominee for president. I just didn't think he had the physical or cognitive capabilities a year ago, and I thought he'd bow out. But they made this nest. Now they got to live in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. And look, we all knew 4 years ago when they kept him in the basement and used COVID as the cover story for keeping him in the basement and away from the American people. We all knew that he was out to lunch back then. And here we are 3.5 years later with an absolute national catastrophe on our hands because of his failures of leadership and actual deliberate torpedoing of the country here. So look, Joe Biden was the perfect puppet for all of these revolutionaries. If they thought that they could push him through and sneak him past the American people a second time this time, they would absolutely do it. But what that catastrophic debate performance showed is that they can no longer hide it. They can no longer keep that big lie, the actual big lie about Joe Biden's incapacitation. They can't keep that lie going. And so they're mad that they can't keep it going. Not that the lie was, that there was a lie to begin with. Everybody with eyes and ears can see it. And now the Democrats are in quite the predicament because they pushed the envelope to try to get him past the American people a second time so that they could keep this whole puppet act going and keep their whole agenda going through. And now it looks like It is failing on their part. And the question now is, can they get somebody else in there at this late hour to energize their base and get the money coming back into the Democrats again?
Yeah, they tried to say, oh, it was a bad night. Everybody says, oh, it was a bad night. A bad night's when LeBron James only scores, 4 points. Okay, that's a bad night. But this is disastrous and dangerous for the United States of America. And how dare they? They say, oh, it was just a bad night. This guy cannot take a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning and make a split-second decision that affects the safety and security of our troops overseas. You remember, the ones that he doesn't think died under his watch, the 18 of them that did die? That's what's just so disastrous about this. Karoline, Monica, Doug, thank you so much for joining us on Hannity tonight.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.